Hello, dear friends, and welcome back to our hybrid Bible study on the book of Genesis. And today we will be trying to do two for the price of one. That is Genesis chapter 29 and Genesis chapter 30. Now, in 29, Jacob has finally reached Laban's land. And in verse 1, Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east. Now, we have to reflect on this for a moment here because the term east has negative connotations in the book of Genesis. We think of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, or being sent from the Garden of Eden, Lot departing from Abraham, Cain going to the land of Nod, and Hagar and Ishmael. All of them were sent to the east, that is, ascending away and moving into wickedness. So negative connotations. It doesn't speak very highly of the land that Jacob has entered into. Now, in verse number 9, he would meet Rachel for the first time, and he would kiss her, not in the romantic sense, but in the respectful sense, and we know that because of the kinsman language here. So, if you have been a part of our Bible study in the book of Ruth, you will remember the kinsman familial respect language of that term. If you have any questions about that, then please reach out to me on the comment section here on Facebook or on YouTube if you do have questions about that. Now we hear as we move further down that Jacob loved Rachel and that he wanted to take her as his wife. Now we are told in verse number 16 that Laban had two daughters, Leah and Rachel. Verse 17, Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. So we're given a glowing idea of who Rachel was, but Leah, well, she just had very bad eyesight, basically. So we're given a really strong contrast between the two. So Jacob asks Laban, or tells Laban, I will serve you for 7 years so that he can take Rachel as his wife. This would basically enable him to raise a satisfactory monetary amount to give as a gift to Laban in order to take Rachel as his spouse. At the end of the 7 years, Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, that I may go into her, for my time is completed. So I've fulfilled my end of the bargain. Now it's time for you to do the same. So they gathered together, all the people of the place, and made a feast. But in the evening, Laban took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. Laban gave his female servant to Zilpah, to his daughter Leah to be her servant. That's important as we move on later on. In the morning, behold, it was Leah. So clearly, Jacob has been shafted. Now, do you remember what the name Jacob means? Now, when you know what the name Jacob means, then you will see the irony of all of this. The deceiver has indeed been deceived. And we can certainly argue, as one person raised in our Bible study on Sunday, that deception certainly runs through the family. Note, of course, how Rebecca had sought it to be her favorite son, Jacob, to take the blessing from her husband, Isaac. So isn't that interesting? I think it's absolutely fascinating. So he had a go at his uncle. Don't blame him, really, can you? And basically he said, it is not so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Again, we have to remember Eastern and Western culture is different. And maybe traditions like this have been a part and parcel of American society over the years. I mean, I'm not the right person to ask on that, of course. But traditionally now, I don't think we really see that as often, but maybe you disagree. And if you do, please include your comments on the comment section here on Facebook or on YouTube. So Jacob is told, complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also in return for serving me another 7 years. So he has to work another 7 years in order to take Rachel as his wife. So he completed her week. Then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. So Jacob went into Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and served Laban for another 7 years. So he didn't have to wait 7 years for Rachel, but he would still have to work 7 years more for his uncle. Note here, I hope you have the copy of the Bible in front of you, how we're given the names of the servants. So Bilhah for Rachel and Zilpah to Leah. When the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb. But Rachel was barren. Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben. She conceived again and bore a son, and said, because the Lord has heard that I am hated, he has given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon. She would bear another son, Levi. And she conceived again and bore another son, and his name was Judah. Very significant name in the Bible. Note all the names here. Who are they? Note the number 12. That's all I'm going to say right now. Now, as we move in to Genesis chapter number 30, we will see Rachel has had no children, has she? She envied her sister. Isn't it interesting that Leah was the one who was hated? Rachel was supposedly the prettier one, the one who was more attractive to Jacob. Yet she was the one who was jealous of the sister who had the bad eyesight because she had children of her own. She said to Jacob, give me children or I shall die. Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, am I in the place of God who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? What do you think of Jacob's reaction here? Saying, well, it's not my fault. God hasn't willed it to be for you to have a child. He is right. It is God's will whether a person has a child or not. But what he is essentially doing here, I would argue, is that he is blaming God for the lack of her offspring, children. Here's the servant, Bilhah. Go into her, Rachel says, that she may give birth on my behalf, that even I may have children through her. Does this bring back memories for you from a previous hybrid Bible study? Well, it should, because it reminds us of Sarah and Hagar and Ishmael. Of course it does. So we have more children here. We have Dan. We have Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had ceased bearing children, she took her servant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. And lo and behold, this servant would bear children on behalf of Leah for Jacob. And we see more names coming up here. We have Gad. We have Asher. Now in verse 14, in the days of wheat harvest, Reuben went and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said to her, is it a small matter that you've taken away my husband? So a bit of a catty remark here, one might say. Would you take away my son's mandrakes also? Rachel said, then he may lie with you tonight in exchange for your son's mandrakes. So that was the agreement that was made. And then Leah would conceive and bear Jacob a fifth son. And his name was Issachar. Leah conceived again a sixth son. And his name was Zebulun. And she would bear a daughter. We have a girl now at last, I guess you could say. And her name was Dinah or Dinar, however you would like to pronounce it. God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. Had God forgotten all about Rachel? Of course not, right? God does not forget about us. He knows about us. He is with us every step of the way. But she would bear a child, and his name was Joseph. Now, Joseph, of course, is a very significant figure as we move deeper into the book of Genesis. Some may think that he is going to be the one where the promised Savior comes through, that it will be his tribe, his line. But of course, that is not the case. It will be through Judah, and it's going to be such a remarkable thing when we get to it, hopefully in the not too distant future. Of course, she would have another child, the youngest child. We're not told about him yet because he comes later, of course, and his name was Benjamin. And of course, when Benjamin was born, she would pass away. Of course, Benjamin would have an integral role during the time of famine when the brothers went to Egypt. Again, I'm jumping forward here because it's so easy to, because it's so fascinating and so interesting. You want to get further and further down the contents of Genesis, but we have to take every step at a time. Now Jacob would grow to have prosperity. Send me away, he said to Laban, that I may go to my own home and country. Remember how God had told him and promised him that he would come back to his homeland. But Laban basically dragged his heels, as we see here in the rest of the content of Genesis chapter 30. And we would see that he would have greater prosperity over Laban's flocks and Laban's belongings, so to speak, I guess, for want of a better phrase. And what happens here is that Laban is being more and more difficult. And in chapter 31, the sons of Laban complain. And basically, Jacob and his family would eventually flee from Laban and return back to his homeland, which of course brings into sharp perspective the possibility of coming face to face with his estranged brother Esau, and how that will indeed play out a little bit later on. So we will see that in chapter 32 next week. We will touch a little bit of chapter 31, of course, as well. And just to give you a heads up, that will be our last hybrid Bible study for a couple of weeks. We will be taking a break on Easter Sunday, so we can focus on the beautiful resurrection of our Savior Jesus Christ. And we will not be having a Bible study on the 11th of April either, due to a very important event that will be taking place at the church that day, which we need to prepare for in advance. So be reassured that, God willing, we will come back together on the 18th in person of April, but be assured that next week we will be together one final time before we take our 2-week break. So may God bless you this day, and I look forward to, God willing, seeing you on Sunday for divine worship at 10:15, or if you cannot join us, then by all means feel free. I encourage you, of course, to attend church wherever it is that you may reside, but you can also watch the sermon, which will be posted online from St. John's at 10 o'clock on Sunday. So may God bless you today and every single day, and I hope this Bible study has been enlightening and that it will provoke some thoughts and maybe even some questions and comments. Take care and have a blessed day. Bye-bye.